everyone. I am Tracy Hunter Abramson, and I am here with Esther Hatch, Sean Ann Bessie, and Sarah M. Eden. Today, we are going to dive into what makes characters, or basically into character, and what makes certain characters really memorable. But before we get too far into that, we have to give a shout out to Sean. She just had her, I don't know how many books this is now, but A Kingdom to Claim just came out a couple weeks ago. So yay, congratulations.
Thank you.
But we want to, first I wanted to ask, you just launched new characters into the world. What is it that is essential in creating a great character? What do you guys think?
I think for me, there needs to be something about them that grounds them or makes them real and relatable. So something that we feel like we can connect to, but then also something that makes them a little bit bigger than life. So there's something unique as well. It's that balance of the two that, to me, I think makes a really great character.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sarah. And I feel like, at least with my books, where they're typically read by women, not always, but I feel like the women especially need to be relatable. And I feel like the men especially need to be that extra thing that you were talking about. And both of them need some of that. But I feel like that's kind of a draw. I also feel like an important thing for my characters is for them to have goals and dreams, and probably something that is getting in the way of those. And that helps. That probably helps them be relatable. I think it goes back to also what Sarah said. Yeah.
Yeah, since we all have those bumps in the road, right?
Right.
And I feel like if it's your hero or heroine in particular, then they need to be likable. And I don't mean that necessarily the book has to start off with two perfect characters, because that's not going to work. They could start off as grumpy, like Sarah's Duke of Kelder, but we love him. We love him. And the reason is because he has a redeeming quality. He has something about him that makes him endearing, and we want what's best for him. We want what's best for a character that has those likable traits, and we see them struggle, we see them falter, but we want the happily ever after. I feel like you have to be able to want that in order to connect, to really care what happens to those people in the books.
I'd so agree. And because I also think that, and you touched on this, Sean, was that the characters can't be perfect. They need to have flaws. But I think those flaws need to be able to be mirrored by the reader. Like the reader can understand, either could imagine having those same struggles, or knowing people who do, and they're lovable anyway. That we all have, none of us are perfect, but we all have things that, everyone's like, okay, that's just you. You're just going to be like that. What is it? The shut up, Adam? It's like,
shut up, Harry.
Shut up, Harry. It's like, it's just, you just know certain things are going to come out of certain characters' mouths, and
Right.
You just want to see that happen. But so all of us have had these various characters who readers have really connected with. What do you think it is that makes those certain characters just jump off the page and stand out?
I think there's probably going to be as many answers to that question as there are readers. But if we have to generalize, I would say that a reader needs somebody that they can relate to, like we just said. But I also think it's really important that a character act consistently through the book, which is also something that you mentioned, Tracy, of, oh, you expected that to come out of his mouth. I think if you start with a character and suddenly they do something that is completely out of character, then it takes a reader back, and you're like, wait, this person isn't who I thought they were. And it's harder to connect if they don't feel like they're getting to know them.
And
humor.
I tried, yeah, humor is a good
one. Humor helps.
Humor always helps.
I tried to think through some of the ones that people have written to me and said, like, wow, I really connected, or I love this character. And I was like, I think the common denominator in mine is a little bit of sassiness, or something, like that little bit of, I think it is the humor that Sean was talking about a little bit. Yeah. So I think something like that makes people just drawn to those characters of mine. I think that, and I would say like kind of a tragic backstory, I think sometimes that helps a lot too. So those are kind of the things that I see as, some of the things that have stood out to me on my characters that I get the most response from.
I think for me, and this is probably as much as a reader as it is as a writer, the thing that really makes a character stand out to me or really, becomes important to me is a character who experiences growth over the course of a book. And I've really kind of been pondering why that might be. I think it's because when we take that journey with a character, one that has been written in a way that is, like we said, relatable, that we feel like we can connect to. They aren't perfect, so they have flaws. And we're seeing them growing into a better version of themselves. We're seeing them grow to a point where they can have more of the happiness we want them to have. We're going on this journey with them. We're experiencing this change and this transformation. And that bonds us to people. If we think about people in our own lives, when we go through something with someone else, when we walk with them while they're experiencing something difficult, it bonds us. It creates a connection. And I think we can, in many ways, feel that same connection to characters when they experience the same thing, because we're there through it all. If they're written well and written deep, we feel like we've actually done that in real life. And that connects us to them in ways that kind of make a little place for them in our little readerly hearts. And it connects us.
Well, and I was actually thinking about this question too, of like, it's like, they're like our friends, it's like we choose the ones that we can relate to the most. And sometimes it is that sense of humor. And sometimes it's a shared understanding of some, worldview or whatever it is. But so I was thinking about, several episodes back, we talked about like, if we were to say what characteristic all of our characters kind of enjoy, like patriotism was something that kind of came out with mine. We've talked about, integrity, honesty, things like that. And I think a lot of times people do really connect with some of those core values that inherently just bleed into those characters. And of course, with me, I'm always just sending poor Jay up a tree. But
it's the tree that we really are bonding with. Jay just happens to be there.
Jay just happens. But and it's funny because somebody's like, "Can we please have a book that he doesn't go up a tree?" And I'm like, he wants the same thing, So our character goal is shared with these four characters. So okay, so what about? And this is something I truly struggle with. What about naming your characters? At what point do you have to, because like you guys probably know, I have the little bracket that just says like name or servant or reporter or whatever it is. And I know on occasion Sarah has slid into the dark side and done this in her writing as well. But how much time do you put into those naming the characters? When do you have to have them? And how bad is it? I mean, you guys are a lot more limited than me because of writing historical. So do you have to reuse them?
I will say I very, very seldom don't have a name for a character when they are first on the page, just because it bothers my brain. Sometimes if it's a very minor character, I will leave it empty, but I fill that in. There is some limit when you're writing historical. The time and place where a book occurs does limit it. But I think, and I'm pretty sure these ladies will attest to it as well, most historical writers take some liberty with that. Otherwise, all of our characters would share the same 5 names, and that would be incredibly confusing. I generally search census records and parish records from the time and place where that character would have been born to get an idea of some of the options. I'll kind of look at their family culture. If they're a family that always names their kids after an ancestor or maybe after a flower, I'll kind of look into those things. If there's some historical precedent, like I can find an instance where a family named all their children after characters in Shakespeare plays, and I figure I probably could have a family that named all their kids after characters from Greek mythology. Like, you've created enough plausibility that you can get away with it. So that's how I kind of get around some of the limits of history.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with like how tricky that can be. And so a lot of times it's like, did this name exist? Fine. Although some names that existed sounds so modern that that's where it gets kind of tricky, where people
Right.
think that your name is modern, but it's not. But
It's not. Yeah.
yeah. So names are really hard for me. And I'm just like kind of laughing as I'm hearing like Tracy and Sarah talk about how you put your names in the book, because I'm kind of like this weird mesh of the two, because I like to name my characters like when they come on the scene. And I do name my characters almost always right off the bat. And then I forget their names. And so from that moment on, they become Mrs. X or
I've done that.
and at some point I will go back and find their name. But like, so, or like when I'm sending books, this is sad, guys. This is so sad, but I might send it even to a beta reader when I have not figured this out yet. And I'll be like, can you look and see if I've named this person and how many times I've named this person? Because sometimes I'll give the same person multiple names because of that. Like I do like to have them named. And if I think it's their first time coming in, I'll give them a name, but sometimes it's their second time and I forgot. So I've struggled with the name thing. It's something I have to go over all the time. I also sometimes give my characters really awful names at the beginning so that I will remember them. So like I use like Mr. Fartond or something recently and then changed it at the end, but I could always remember it. And I knew like it kind of was greasy like his character. And so like that helped me even write him. And then at the end I gave him a more normal name. Yeah. Yeah.
Esther, you're making me feel so much better right now. Because I do all of those things.
Because I can't remember my closest friends' names sometimes, or my children. Like it is it's a real struggle.
Oh, well, I don't honestly know how I can top that, but
I hope you don't.
No, I'm not planning on it. I think that names for historical novels are hard because you do feel a little bit more limited. I know, I mean, just in real life, that's the way it is. If my family is doing genealogy, there are literally half a dozen names and they just recycle. And that's how we know that we have the right family on the census. It's because it's the same names over and over again. And that's kind of how it was, and so it is difficult. So when people are reading, let's say, a lot of Regencies, the chances are good they're going to see those same names coming up again because the same names were reused. When I go into a new era, like let's say I'm writing a medieval book, I will look up medieval names for Saxons or Vikings or whatever, and I will actually create a master list at the back of a notebook of names. And when I have to name a minor character, I will turn to that list, choose a name, and then, Esther, here's the key. You cross it off.
You lost me at list, John. That is way too organized.
Oh, well, okay. Just like maybe half a dozen names. Even that would help you. But
I will say I once had to use a friend's name in a book because I had double used a name in a book. So I had to change one. So I changed it. And then this particular friend was beta reading and she said, hey, this name has been used already. So I picked a name that I'd already used also. So I was just like, can I just use your name? And she said, yes. So.
Oh, that's
I was like, because I know I haven't used that one.
Well, and then, there are things that readers don't maybe even know that we have to do. Like, we try not to get names that start with the same letter or are very similar. And then we also try to get names, and this is one that I really struggle with because of the genres that I write in. We try to get names that are fairly easy to pronounce, so that a reader's not going to stumble over it. And I have actually had readers, send me messages with some of my Welsh books where they're like, I just couldn't get past these names. It was so hard for me. And the thing that I'm stuck with is if I'm writing a historical and those were the actual people's names, then I'm stuck. And so, so I hope readers will give us a little bit of grace with that. But yeah, names can be tricky. That's a very long way of saying that.
It's hard. It's harder than I think people realize, because like even on my Facebook group, I've said, hey, I need names, and people will give me names that are major characters already in series. It's like, because they're thinking like, oh, this is my child or my friends or whatever, which is still great. They're still giving me great names, but it can be a challenge. But so I often, like I said, I often leave those secondary characters without names until I'm nearly done. But I find that if somebody starts really getting a lot of personality, that I need to go ahead and give them a name sooner. So what point do your secondary characters get to that point where you really know? Like, when do you really know your supporting cast? Is it like, do you know them going in, or is it they're developing as they go?
I don't know that I know them going in, but if we're talking about secondary characters that I would put in the important category, like your main character's best friend or a parent who plays a role in the story, as opposed to the waiter or the taxi driver, that just makes a brief appearance. I would say that for me, those characters develop alongside the main characters. And so their characters are, their arc and their growth is pretty similar to my main characters.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like my good, I would say good, like not antagonistic characters are like that. Like they grow and I get to know them and I get to love them as I write them, which is exactly how I feel about my main characters too. But I will tell you, I knew exactly who Mr. Fartund was the moment I named him. So I think sometimes
Fartund by any other name.
Yeah. Like he was there. He was there as soon as I named him. So I think it kind of depends. And I feel like more often those people that are antagonizing, maybe they come a little bit more like, well, I know what his goals are because they're going to be the opposite of what my character is, or they're going to be aggravating them or something like that. Yeah.
Love that. So much of my characterization work is done in my pre-writing work when I'm doing all of my character Bible and all of that. So generally speaking, by the time I start writing, I already know my cast pretty well, their goals and their characteristics and their personalities. But there is something really special about when you sit down and write it and they start to kind of come alive on the page. Even I, who do a ton of pre-writing work, am often surprised once the characters are there and you start to see a little more of the nuance, especially when they're interacting with other characters. Those are the moments where I go, oh, okay, I know a little something extra about you, because you see what parts of their personality come out based on who they're interacting with. So yeah, I know them pretty well before I start writing, but there's something magical about when they're actually there on the page.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, because it is wonderful both to see what other people do and how it falls together, but also that some of us are the same, even if it's just Esther and I, we don't, that whole list thing doesn't always work. We try. We do.
True story though. Sean told me once about that list that she made. My most recent manuscript I finished, I did that. I made a full list of names that would work and just crossed them off as I used them to fill in the cast. It was brilliant. It's now a new permanent fixture in my plotting notebook. So,
yay. No, I feel that's a big deal. If I accomplish nothing else today, that was my accomplishment.
Made the notebook.
Sean made the notebook. This is amazing. Okay, everyone heard it here first. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Between the Lines, and we hope we will see you again next time.